Hi, I'm Marc, and welcome to the weekly Outside Views report on the politics in Asia and Oceania. China's head of state and party leader Xi Jinping wants to turn the Chinese military into a great wall of steel. In a speech at the end of the annual session of the People's Congress in Beijing on Monday, the president said that the modernization of the People's Liberation Army should be promoted in order to effectively safeguard national sovereignty, security, and development interests. Against the background of tensions with the United States, the People's Congress had previously approved a sharp increase in defense spending this year by 7.2%. Xi Jinping called for reunification with Taiwan. Relations should be developed peacefully, but outside interference and splittist activities by Taiwanese independence forces must be resolutely rejected, Xi Jinping said in a speech to nearly 3,000 delegates in the Great Hall of the People. The unification process must be pushed unshakably. Pandemic, the Japanese have consistently worn face masks whether indoors or outdoors. Laws were not necessary for this. The state only issued recommendations. But those have also been lifted since Monday. According to the new guidelines, masks only have to be worn in medical facilities, nursing homes, and on crowded public transport. However, observers expect the country's citizens to keep their previous habit of wearing masks everywhere, often alone in the car, for the time being. The Japanese have always attached great importance to hygiene. Wearing a face mask when you have a cold, for example, so as to not infect others, was common even before the corona pandemic. Just like bowing instead of shaking hands or taking off your shoes before going into the house. Talking loudly on trains, which are chronically overcrowded in Japan's megacities like Tokyo, has always been considered impolite. China's People's Congress on Monday approved the government's growth target of around 5% and the budget with a sharp increase, as I mentioned earlier, in defense spending. Against the background of growing tensions with the USA, the rising power's military budget is expected to increase by 72% and thus more than total spending. That's why I'm mentioning it again. After ending the zero COVID policy with lockdowns, forced quarantine, and mass testing in December, the government expects the second largest economy to recover this year. In order to stimulate the economy, higher new borrowing than in the previous year is planned. The deficit should be around 3% of economic output. The previous year was 2.8%. The self-declared nuclear power North Korea has said it has fired two military guided missiles from a submarine in the direction of the open sea. It was therefore a test that was intended to serve as a nuclear deterrent. The two strategic cruise missiles landed in the target area in the Sea of Japan, or the Koreans say the East Sea, 1,500 kilometers away, as the state media reported on Monday. The test took place early Sunday morning. The South Korean military confirmed the weapon test of the largely isolated neighboring country. However, it initially spoke of a still unknown submarine missile that had been shot down from the east coast of North Korea. China's President Xi Jinping has called on his country to become more technologically independent. China must advance self-reliance in science and technology, Xi Jinping said on Monday at the end of the annual session of the People's Congress in Beijing. Efforts would have to be made to effectively modernize the economy and improve scientific and technological capabilities. Quality growth must be encouraged. We should strive to effectively improve the quality of the economy and achieve reasonable quantitative growth, is what Xi Jinping said. Against the background of ongoing tensions with the United States, China has been working to become independent in key technologies such as computer chips for some time. South Korea and Japan are getting closer again in their conflict over Japanese export restrictions. South Korea's Ministry of Commerce announced on Monday that an arbitration procedure at the World Trade Organization, the WTO, which goes back to a complaint against Japan, should be suspended. Both countries have agreed to resume bilateral consultations on export control issues. The trade dispute was sparked in July 2019 by Tokyo's decision to impose stricter controls on the export of materials for the production of ships and displays to South Korea, two of the country's most important export goods. The background to the trade dispute is a dispute over compensation for Korean forced laborers during Japan's colonial rule from 1910 to 1945. Japan imposed the controls after the Supreme Court in South Korea ruled that two Japanese companies must pay damages to former forced laborers. However, Tokyo sees the issue as closed by a 1965 treaty. According to the new Chinese Prime Minister Li Qiang, the prospects for the global economy are not optimistic. China sees many uncertainties, instability and unpredictable events, is what the Prime Minister said on Monday at his first press conference concluding this year's annual session of the People's Congress in Beijing. Stabilizing economic growth is a challenging task not only for China but for all countries in the world, Li Qiang said. It will not be easy for China to achieve growth of around 5% as planned, and additional efforts will be required, he said. In Nepal, tourists will soon only be allowed to go hiking in the Himalayas with a local mountaineer or porter. The new regulation applies from April and is intended to improve the safety of hikers and create jobs for locals, as a spokesman for the Ministry of Tourism in Kathmandu told the German press agency on Tuesday. The local guide must therefore be mediated by a trekking company registered with the government. The situation is different for mountaineers who want to climb the peaks of mountains such as Mount Everest or Mount Annapurna. The presence of a local companion helps ensure that hikers are rescued more quickly in an emergency, as the spokesman said. His authority has information on around 14 to 50 cases of missing hikers every year and is often difficult to save them. Many trekking routes in the Himalayas are difficult to access, with no road access, means of communication, or human settlements nearby. A rescue in difficult terrain can take hours or even days. The highly indebted, crisis-ridden state of Sri Lanka says it has met all the conditions set by the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, in order to receive a 4-year aid program worth $2.9 billion. The island nation south of India now hopes that the IMF will approve the release of the money this month, as government spokesman and Transport Minister Bandula Gunawardena said at a news conference in Colombo on Wednesday. Most recently, the embassy of Sri Lanka's largest bilateral lender, China, delivered a financial assurance letter to the Ministry of Finance in Colombo on Tuesday. Charges have been brought against former Malaysian Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin following allegations of corruption. The 75-year-old was accused of 4 counts of abuse of office and 2 counts of money laundering, as Malaysian media reported on Friday after Muhyiddin appeared in court in the capital Kuala Lumpur. The politician denied the allegations. He accuses the new government under Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim of wanting to silence the opposition. After ex-Prime Minister Najib Razak, Muhyiddin is the second former Malaysian Prime Minister to be investigated. Najib Razak, who was in office from 2009 to 2018, has been convicted of abuse of power, embezzlement and money laundering. He is currently serving a 12-year prison sentence. And this concludes this week's report on Asia and Oceania, but the next one is right here in the end screen, so I'll see you there. I'll be back.